I'm Ann Beynon from the Institute for Scientific Information at Clarivate. I hope you guys over there can hear. If you can't, give a shout. And sorry, there's lots of data. Maybe you won't see it all over there, but my email is on here, and if you have any questions, anyone's welcome to contact me. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I know this is the afternoon slump, but there's a lot of data here, so bear with me. I'm going to look at the SDGs as we see them in the Web of Science, okay, which is our citation index you might be familiar with at Clarivate. And the goal is really to take a disciplinary view, but I'll show you some general facts and figures as well. So what we're going to look at to get us started here is the Web of Science core collection, which is over 21,000 journals. You might be familiar. Multidisciplinary, coming from all over the world. Some are open access, some are not. And through the lens of insights, which is our research analytics tool. I focused on 2008 to 2022 as a recent 5-year period for the data. It was indexed through January, so it's not a complete 2022 view, so keep that in mind for now because there is a lag. And we're going to look at articles and reviews as the document types. Well, actually, don't look at that. I want to ask you a question first to see what you think. So some of the key headlines here include the percentage of the overall output we have in the Web of Science that are mapped to SDGs. So what do you guys think, percentage-wise, of all the research that we would index from all these different disciplines would be SDG related? Does anyone have a guess? 30%. We have a 30% here. Any other guesses? 50? Okay, well, you sir, are closer. So 45%. In that 5-year period are related to SDGs as we define them, and I'll explain to you how we do that. And then we'll go into some details. So 38% of that total are open access, gold or hybrid gold. And they do cover all of our journal categories, so 254 different journal categories. And environmental sciences and environmental studies are the categories that are most represented in the data. And then from a publisher perspective, of the publishers publishing at least 25,000 papers in that 5-year period, Marianne Liebert had the highest percentage of SDG papers, 74%. So now we'll get into the details. So hopefully that piqued your interest. So defining the SDGs is really important, right? Everyone does this in a different way. So what we do in Insights is we use 16 of the 17 SDGs. I think some of the other panelists will explain a little bit more about the SDGs themselves if you're not familiar. We exclude partnerships for the goals because that doesn't really map onto the publications. And what we actually do is we group what we call micro-citation topics to the SDGs. These are clusters, algorithmically created clusters of papers using citation relationships that we developed in conjunction with CWTS in Leiden. One citation topic can be mapped to multiple SDGs, and then, so one paper can be mapped, therefore, to multiple SDGs. I will mention that we are part of a STM workshop initiative to help create standards of SDGs across the industry. So there is work underway to create some standard definitions and methods so that everyone can be using something similar. So something to keep an eye on. The Web of Science journal categories you'll see mentioned here, you might be familiar with those because that's what you see in the Web of Science, it's what you see in journal citation reports and the journal impact factors. There are 254 of those, and they are assigned by our editors based on the scope of the journal. Because I'm using Insights, also note that articles from multidisciplinary journals like Science, for example, are reclassified into a Web of Science subject category based on their citation relationships. And journals can be in multiple Web of Science categories, but any aggregate counts I'm showing you have been deduplicated. Okay, so that's the obligatory kind of methodology. Okay, so now for data. So in that 5-year period, 5.6 million articles and reviews were mapped to SDGs. As I mentioned, that's 45% of the total. If you've ever worked with this, you'll probably immediately realize that a lot of it comes from SDG 3, which is good health and well-being, right? So 74% of all of the SDG research we index is good health and well-being because, of course, there's a lot of research on health and biomedicine, right? And basically all of that gets mapped to SDG 3. So it does dominate. 38%, as I mentioned, are gold or hybrid gold. We do track at the article level hybrid articles through on paywall. You can see here the trend. It is going up, as I mentioned. 2022 right now, in this view of the data, is not complete, so I'm pretty confident it will eventually surpass 2021, but it's definitely, on the rise. And I also correlated it with journal impact using the journal citation indicator. So if you're not familiar, this is an indicator we have in journal citation reports. It's not the journal impact factor. It is used across all the journals that we have and is normalized by field. So we like to look at quartiles. So this looks at Q1, quartile 2, et cetera. So just to get a sense of where this research is being published. And you can see that in the quartile 1 journals is the brunt of it, right? Now that could be for various reasons, could be the mega journals, the big open access journals we talked about. We can look into that, but just wanted to give you a feel for kind of where it's published in that way. Disciplinary views. So environmental sciences is the most predominant category based on our traditional journal categories when we look at all of the 16 SDGs, okay? But the SDG research, defined, as I said, through those microcitation topics, crosses all 254 disciplines, which is something that I was kind of surprised at because it means that there's at least one paper in all of them, even in arts and humanities, okay? And I also wanted to look at sort of the how multidisciplinary those journals are by looking at the average number of Web of Science journal categories mapped to those particular journals publishing the SDG research versus just the general population as a whole. And it actually came out pretty close, although the SDG publishing journals, meaning they publish something SDG related, have on average 1.44 categories assigned to them, whereas the whole population is 1.41, so maybe a little bit more multidisciplinary. And the average number of categories represented per of the 16 SDGs was 250. So again, covering a wide range of the traditional way we look at journals. And there's just the breakdown of the publications. Probably not a huge surprise considering if you're familiar with the SDGs themselves. I also looked at it in a little bit of a different way by looking at the top 5 Web of Science journal categories for each SDG, and then adding up those placements, because since health and well-being dominates so much, I didn't want that to overshadow kind of everything else. Some of them are quite small, in terms of size. So when I looked at it this way, environmental sciences also was kind of the winner with the most placements in top 5 for the SDGs, but you could see more of a diversity now in things like political science, economics, engineering, education, which is really great. So just wanted to get a sense of kind of the disciplinary spread, of the SDGs, and gives you an example here of SDG 1 of how I did that. I also wanted to look at publishers. The panel thought it'd be interesting. This is just a very high-level view, so definitely could be delved into much deeper, but I did kind of 2 different views. One was looking at the top 10 publishers in our data by output. So the purple ones these are just the biggest publishers that we have, and looking at their percentage of SDG-related research. Okay, and again, it's not a judgment like it's good or bad. It's just showing, what's there. So Frontiers and Sage actually have the highest percentage in the last 5 years of their research that belongs to an SDG. Frontiers was 63%. And then I thought, well, let's just look at all the publishers, and I did limit to those that had at least 25,000 records in the database, so some of them are very, very small. I wanted to have apples to apples. So when we look at it that way, that's where Marianne Liebert has the highest percentage of SDG-related research, over 70%. But you could see Frontiers and Sage, as I pointed out, do belong to both lists, so they're also just pretty high in general with SDG research. And then lastly, I tried to do a little bit of a citation analysis to look at the citing side of things. So trying to see with the SDG research, what are the disciplines of the research citing the SDGs, right? We all hope that there's, again, kind of like multidisciplinary impact and impact beyond one's, native field. So for instance, I took SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, and looked at the citing paper categories. It spanned all 254 Web of Science categories, which again is really interesting and encouraging. And I compared the top 10 for both things. So for the SDG 12 papers versus the papers citing the SDG 12 papers. And you could see in red ones that were different. So these are fields, it was material science, chemistry, and management that appeared more frequently in the citing list, perhaps indicating that the research being done then in this SDG is having maybe a bigger impact, maybe in materials development or in management practices, which I think probably is very encouraging. So here's those key findings again. I know this was very quick. We only have 10 minutes, but just to summarize for you and look forward to the discussion. I just want to mention that if you're interested in what we do to support sustainability at Clarivate, we are coming out with our 2022 report on sustainability very soon, and there's some facts and figures there for you. So thank you.